Book 1, Canto 6. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Morgan Scorpion. The Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. Book 1, The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross. Canto 6. From lawless lust by wondrous grace fair Una is released, whom salvage nation does adore, and learns her wise beheast. As when a ship that flies fair under sail, an hidden rock escaped hath unawares, that lay in wait her wrack for to bewail, the mariner yet half amazed stares at peril past, and yet in doubt ne dares to joy at his full happy oversight. So doubly is distressed twixt joys and cares the dreadless courage of this elfin knight, having escaped so sad ensamples in his sight. Yet sad he was that his too hasty speed the fair Jewess had forced him leave behind, and yet more sad that Una, his dear dreed, her truth had stained with treason so unkind. Yet crime in her could never creature find, but for his love, and for her own self's sake, she wandered had from one to other end, him for to seek, nor ever would forsake, till her unawares the fierce Sansloy did overtake. Who after Archimago's foul defeat, led her away into a forest wild, and turning wrathful fire to lustful heat, with beastly sin thought her to have defiled, and made the vassal of his pleasures viled. Yet first he cast by treaty and by trains, her to persuade that stubborn fort to yield, for greater conquest of hard love he gains, that works it to his will, than he that it constrains. With fawning words he courted her a while, and looking lovely, and oft sighing sore, her constant heart did tempt with divers guile, but words and looks and sighs she did abhor, as rock of diamond stedfast evermore. Yet for to feed his fiery lustful eye, he snatcht the veil that hung before her face before, then gan her beauty shine, as brightest sky, and burnt his beastly heart to force her chastity. So when he saw his flattering arts to fail, and subtle engines bet from battery, with greedy force he gan the fort assail, whereof he wend possessed soon to be, and win rich spoil of ransacked chastity. Ah heavens, that do this hideous act behold, and heavenly Virgin thus outraged see, how can ye vengeance just so long withhold, and hurl not flashing flames upon that Paynim bold? The piteous maiden, careful, comfortless, does throw out thrilling shrieks and shrieking cries, the last vain help of woman's great distress, and with loud plaints importuneth the skies, that molten stars do drop like weeping eyes, and Phoebus flying so most shamefull sight, his blushing face in foggy cloud implies, and hides for shame. What wit of mortal wight can now devise to quit a thrall from such a plight? Eternal Providence exceeding thought, where none appears can make herself away. A wondrous way it for this lady wrought, from lions' claws to pluck the griped prey. Her shrill outcries and shrieks so loud did bray, that all the woods and forests did resound. A troop of fawns and satyrs far away within the wood were dancing in a round, whilst old Sylvanus slept in shady arbour sound. Who when they heard that piteous strained voice, in hast forsook their rural merriment, and ran towards the far rebounded noise, to weet that wight so loudly did lament, unto the place they come incontinent. Whom when the raging Sarazin espide, a rude, misshapen, monstrous rabblement, whose like he never saw, he durft not bide, but got his ready steed, and fast away gan ride. The wild wood gods arrived in the place, there find the Virgin doleful desolate, with ruffled raiments and fair blubbered face, as her outrageous foe had left her late, and trembling yet through fear of former hate, or stand amazed at so uncouth sight, and gin to pity her unhappy state, or stand astonied at her beauty bright, in their rude eyes unworthy of so wofull plight. She more amazed in double dread doth dwell, and every tender part for fear does shake, as when a greedy wolfe through hunger fell, a seely lamb far from the flock does take, of whom he meanes his bloody feast to make. A lyon spies fast running towards him, the innocent prey in haft he does forsake, which quit from death yet quakes in every limbe, with change of feare to see the lyon look so grim. Such fearefull fit aflayd her trembling hart, no word to speak, no joynt to move she had. The salvage nation feel her secret smart, and read her sorrow in her countenance sad. Their frowning foreheads with rough horns yclad, and rustic horror all afide do lay, and gently grinning, shew a semblance glad to comfort her, and feare to put away. Their backward bent knees teach her humbly to obey. The doubtfull damzell dare not yet commit her single person to their barbarous truth, but still twixt feare and hope amazed does sit, late learned what harme to hasty trust ensuth. They in compassion of her tender youth, and wonder of her beauty foveraine, are wont with pity and unwonted ruth, and all proftrate upon the lowly plaine, do kiffe her feet, and fawne on her with countenance faine. Their hearts she guesseth by their humble guize, and yields her to extremity of time. So from the ground she fearless doth arize, and walketh forth without fufpect of crime. They all as glad, as birds of joyous prime, thence lead her forth about her dancing round, shouting and singing all the shepherds rhyme, and with green branches strowing all the ground, do worship her as Queene, with olive girland crowned. And all the way their merry pipes they sound, that all the woods with doubled echo ring, and with their horned feet do weare the ground, leaping like wanton kids in pleasant spring. So towards old Sylvanus they her bring, who with the noyfe awakned, cometh out to weete the caufe, his weake steps governing, and aged limbs on cypress stadle ftout, and with an ivy twine his waist is girt about. Farre off he wonders what them makes so glad, if Bacchus merry fruit they did invent, or Cybele's frantic rites have made them mad. They drawing nigh unto their God prefent, that flowre of faith and beauty excellent. The God himfelfe viewing that mirror rare, stood long amazed, and burnt in his intent. His owne faire Dryope now he thinks not faire, and Pholoe foule, when her to this he doth compare. The wood-borne people fall before her flat, and worship her as Goddeffe of the wood. And old Sylvanus selfe bethinketh not, what to think of wight so faire, but gazing stood, in doubt to deeme her born of earthly brood. Sometimes Dame Venus selfe he feemes to see, but Venus never had so sober mood. Sometimes Diana he takes her to be, but misseth bow and shafts, and buskins to her knee. By view of her he ginneth to revive his ancient love and dearest Cyparis, and calls to mind his portraiture alive, how faire he was, and yet not faire to this, and how he slew with glancing dart amiffe a gentle hind, the which the lovely boy did love as life, above all worldly bliffe. For griefe whereof the lad nould after joy, but pined away in anguish and selfe-wild annoy. The woody Nymphs, faire Hamadryads, her to behold do thither run apace, and all the troupe of light-foot Naiads flock all about to see her lovely face. But when they viewed have her heavenly grace, they envy her in their malicious mind, and fly away for feare of foule difgrace. But all the Satyrs scorne their woody kind, and henceforth nothing faire but her on earth they find. Glad of such luck, the luckless lucky mayd did her content to please their feeble eyes, and long time with the salvage people stayd, to gather breath in many miseries, during which time her gentle wit she plies, to teach them truth, which worshipped her in vaine, and made her the image of idolatries. But when their bootless zeale she did reftraine from her own worship, they her asse would worship faine. It fortuned a noble warlike knight, by just occasion to that forest came, to seek his kindred, and the lineage right, from whence he tooke his well-deserved name. He had in armes abroad won muchel fame, and filled farre lands with glory of his might. Plaine, faithfull, true, and enemy of shame, and ever loved to fight for ladies right, but in vainglorious frays he little did delight. A Satyrs fonne, yborne in forest wild, by strange adventure as it did betide, and there begotten of a lady mild, Faire Thyamis, the daughter of the bride, that was in sacred bands of wedlock tied To Therion, a loose unruly swaine, who had more joy to range the forest wide, and chace the salvage beast with busie paine, then serve his ladies love, and wast in pleasures vaine. The forlorne mayd did with loves longing burne, and could not lacke her lovers company, but to the wood she goes, to serve her turne, and seeke her spouse, that from her still does fly, and follows other game and venery. A Satyr chanced her wandring for to find, and kindling coals of lust in brutish eye, the loyal links of wedlocke did unbind, and made her person thrall unto his beastly kind. So long in secret cabin there he held her captive to his sensual desire, that with timely fruit her belly swelled, and bore a boy unto that salvage sire. Then home he suffered her for to retire, for ransome leaving him the late borne child, whom till to riper years he gan aspire, he noursled up in life and manners wild, amongst wild beasts and woods, from laws of men exiled. For all he taught the tender imp was but to banish cowardize and bastard feare. His trembling hand he would him force to put upon the lion and the rugged beare, and from the she beares teats her whelps to teare. And eke wild roaring bulls he would him make to tame, and ride their backs not made to beare, and the roebucks in flight to overtake, that every beast for feare of him did fly and quake. Thereby so fearless and so fell he grew, that his owne sire and maister of his guise did often tremble at his horrid view, and oft for dread of hurt would him advize the angry beasts not rashly to despize, nor too much to provoke, for he would learne the lion stoupe to him in lowly wise, a lesson hard, and make the libbard sterne leave roaring, when in rage he for revenge did earne. And for to make his powre approved more, wild beasts in iron yokes he would compell, the spotted panther and the tusked boar, the pardale swift and the tiger cruel, the antelope and wolfe both fierce and fell, and them constraine in equal team to draw. Such joy he had their stubborn hearts to quell, and sturdy courage tame with dreadful awe, that his behest they feared as tyrants law. His loving mother came upon a day unto the woods to see her little son, and chanced unwares to meet him in the way after his sports and cruel paftime done, when after him a lioness did run, that roaring all with rage did loud require her children deare, whom he away had won. The lion whelps she saw how he did beare, and lull in rugged armes, withouten childifh feare. The fearefull dame all quaked at the sight, and turning back gan fast to fly away, until with love revoked from vaine affright, she hardly yet persuaded was to stay, and then to him thefe womanifh words gan say: Ah Satyrane, my dearling and my joy, for love of me leave off this dreadfull play, to dally thus with death is no fit toy. Go find some other playfellows, mine owne sweet boy. In thefe and like delights of bloody game he trained was, till riper years he wrought, and there abode, while any beast of name walked in that forest, whom he had not taught to feare his force, and then his courage haught desired of forreign foemen to be known, and far abroad for strange adventures sought, in which his might was never overthrowne, but through all Faerie land his famous worth was blowne. Yet evermore it was his manner faire, after long labours and adventures spent, unto thofe native woods for to repaire, to see his sire and offspring ancient. And now he thither came for like intent, where he unwares the fairest Una found, strange lady, in so strange habiliment, teaching the Satyrs, which her sat around, true sacred lore, which from her sweet lips did redound. He wondred at her wisdom heavenly rare, whose like in womens wit he never knew, and when her courteous deeds he did compare, gan her admire, and her sad sorrows rue, blaming of fortune, which such troubles threw, and joyed to make proof of her cruelty on gentle dame, so hurtless and so true. Thenceforth he kept her goodly company, and learned her discipline of faith and verity. But she all vowed unto the red cross knight, his wandring perill closely did lament, nor in this new acquaintance could delight, but her deare heart with anguish did torment, and all her wit in secret counsels spent, how to escape. At last in privy wise to Satyrane she shewed her intent, who glad to gaine such favour, gan devize, how with that pensive mayd he best might thence arize. So on a day, when Satyrs all were gone, to do their fervice to Sylvanus old, The gentle virgin left behind alone, he led away with courage stout and bold. Too late it was to satires to be told, or ever hope recover her againe. In vaine he feekes that having cannot hold, so faft he carried her with carefull paine, that they the woods are paft, and come now to the plaine. The better part now of the lingring day they travelled had, when as they far efpide a weary wight forewandering by the way, and towards him they gan in haft to ride, to weet of newes that did abrode betide, or tidings of her Knight of the Red Crofle. But he them fpying gan to turne afide, for feare as feemed, or for some feigned lofle, more greedy they of newes, faft towards him do crofle. A filly man, in fimple weedes foreworne, and foyled with duft of the long dryed way, his fandals were with toylefome travell torne, and face all tanned with fcorching funny ray, as he had travelled many a fommers day, through boyling fands of Araby and Ind, and in his hand a Jacobs ftaffe, to ftay his weary limbs uppon, and eke behind his fcrip did hang, in which his needments he did bind. The Knight approaching nigh of him enquir'd tidings of warre and of adventures new, but warres nor new adventures none he heard. Then Una gan to aske, if ought he knew, or heard abrode of that her champion trew, that in his armour bare a croslet red. Ay me, deare Dame, quoth he, well may I rue to tell the fad fight, which mine eyes have red. Thefe eyes did fee that Knight both living and eke dead. That cruell word her tender heart so thrild, that fudden cold did run through every veine, and stony horror all her fences fild, with dying fit, that downe she fell for paine. The Knight her lightly reared up againe, and comforted with courteous kind reliefe. Then won from death, she bad him tell and plaine the further procefle of her hidden griefe. The lefler pangs can beare, who hath endur'd the chiefe. Then gan the Pilgrim thus: I chaunft this day, this fatall day, that shall I ever rue, to fee two Knights in travaile on my way, a sorry fight, arranged in battell new, both breathing vengeance, both of wrathfull hew. My fearefull flefh did tremble at their strife, to fee their blades fo greedily embrue, that drunk with blood, yet thirsted after life. What more, the Red Crofle Knight was flaine with Paynim knife. Ah, dearest Lord, quoth fhe, how might that be, and he the stoutest Knight that ever won? Ah, dearest Dame, quoth he, how might I fee the thing, that might not be, and yet was done? Where is, fayd Satiraine, that Paynim's fon, that him of life and us of joy hath reft? Not far away, quoth he hence doth wonne, forby a fountaine, where I late him left, washing his bloody wounds, that through the steele were cleft. Therewith the Knight thence marcht forth in haste, whilft Una with huge heavinefle oppreft, could not for sorrow follow him so faft. And soon he came, as he the place had gheft, whereas that Pagan proud himfelfe did reft, in fecret shadow by a fountaine fide. Even he it was, that erft would have fuppreft faire Una, whom when Satiraine efpide, with foule reprochfull words he boldly him defide, and said: Arife, thou cursed miscreant, that hast with knightlefle guile and treacherous traine faire knighthood foully shamed, and dost vaunt that good Knight of the Red Crofle to have flaine. Arife, and with like treafon now maintaine thy guilty wrong, or elfe thee guilty yield. The Saracen this hearing rofe amaine, and catching up in haft his three fquare fhield, and shining helmet, soon him buckled to the field. And drawing nigh him, said: Ah, misborne elfe, in evill houre thy foes thee hither fent, anothers wrongs to wreake upon thy felfe. Yet ill thou blamest me for having blent my name with guile and traitorous intent. That Red Crofle Knight perdie I never flew. But had he been, where erft his armes were lent, the enchanter vaine his error fhould not rue. But thou his error shalt, I hope now proven true. Therewith they gan both furious and fell to thunder blowes, and fiercely to affaile, each other bent his enemy to quell, that with their force they pierced both plate and maile, and made wide furrows in their flefhes fraile, that it would pity any living eye. Large floods of blood adowne their fides did raile, but floods of blood could not them satisfie. Both hungred after death, both chose to win or die. So long they fight, and fell revenge pursue, that fainting each, themfelves to breathen let, and oft refresht, battell oft renew, as when two boars with rankling malice met, their gory fides frefh bleeding fiercely fret, till breathlefle both themfelves afide retire, where foaming wrath their cruel tusks they whet, and trample the earth, And whilst they may respire, then back to fight again, new breathed and entire. So fiercely when these knights had breathed once, They gan to fight returne, increafing more Their puissant force, and cruel rage at once, With heaped ftrokes more hugely then before, That with their dreary wounds and bloody gore They both deform'd, fcarcely could be knowne. By this fad Una, fraught with anguifh fore, Led with their noyfe, which through the aire was throwne, Arrived, where they in earth their fruitlefle blood had fowne. Whom all fo foone as that proud Sarazin efpide, He gan revive the memory Of his lewd lufts and late attempted fin, And left the doubtfull battell haftily, To catch her, newly offred to his eye. But Satiraine the ftrokes him turning ftayd, And fternely bad him other bufineffe ply, Then hunt the fteps of pure unspotted mayd. Wherewith he all enraged, thefe bitter fpeeches fayd. O foolifh Faeries Sonne, what fury mad Has thee incenft to hafte thy dolefull fate? Were it not better I that Lady had, Then that thou haft repented it too late? Moft fencelefle man he, that himfelfe doth hate, To love another. Lo, then for thine aide Here take thy lovers token on thy pate. So they to fight, the whiles the royal mayd Fled farre away, of that proud Paynim fore affrayd. But that falfe pilgrim, which that leafing told, Being indeed old Archimage, did ftay In fecret fhadow, all this to behold, And much rejoyced in their bloody fray. But when he faw the damzell pafle away, He left his ftond, and her purfu'd apace, In hope to bring her to her laft decay. But for to tell her lamentable cafe, And eke this battels end, will need another place. End of Canto VI, Book I. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross.